Good evening. Hi, thank you so much for being here today. I was in the restroom when I heard Steve ask the question, how many people are here for your first WordPress meetup? A couple people. Cool, welcome. I'm excited you're here. My name is Christy Chirinos. I work at a company called Liquid Web. I'm wearing the t-shirt. And I'm the product manager for Managed WooCommerce hosting over at Liquid Web. It's not my first job in WordPress. Before that, I was, or still am, one of the co-owners of the Caldera Forms plugin, which is a form building plugin for WordPress that's available in the repository, and worked closely with Josh Pollock to take that project from open source project to commercial plugin, which according to Gabriel makes it more safe. So I love that. I transitioned off the project and into my new role at Liquid Web about 4 months ago. Which means that, like many of you in the room, I had a lot to learn about WooCommerce. I had used it before as a user, right? So using it to actually sell things using WordPress. But beyond that, and especially on a product manager at a hosting company offering a managed WooCommerce solution, I didn't have that under my belt. And I was hired for experience and ability to learn as opposed to WooCommerce knowledge. So I was tasked with figuring out WooCommerce. And as we learned with Gabriel, WooCommerce is the major e-commerce plugin for WordPress. So we have about 13 million sites using it. It is lagging behind Magento significantly, but it's still the second largest player, which means that more and more people are choosing to use WooCommerce as their e-commerce solution, especially as WordPress takes a larger share of the market. Which means that if we're looking at e-commerce solution, then we're looking at WooCommerce. And if we're looking at WordPress continuing to grow as a framework and beyond its history as a blogging platform, then we have to pay attention to WooCommerce. It sounds like on the WordCamp New York website, there's a very informative talk about WooCommerce that tells us the history of it and how it came about. But the end of that story is that Automatic now owns it. So Automatic, who runs WordPress.com and owns all of the trademarks for WordPress, also owns WooCommerce. If they're paying attention, we should be paying attention. So at Liquid Web, we have a managed WooCommerce offering. I've done other stuff. I mentioned Caldera Forms. I got my MBA from Florida State University in 2015. I work in this intersection of technology and business. I am not a developer. I am also not non-technical and will never describe myself that way. Before that, I worked at a bank. So far cry from WordPress, but if you want to talk about personal banking, I am also your gal. I lived here in New York until very recently. I moved to DC on May 11th. I'm having a ton of fun. But it's real, I know. I heard like, oh. But it's really nice to be back. Lots of life changes lately. So I mentioned to you that I started this new job 4 months ago. So I start my new job and my new boss, who, if you follow WordPress blogs, is Chris Letma. So if you're into his blog, that's my new boss. So it's kind of cool because people pay him for mentoring, but I'm just getting paid to be mentoring coach. It's awesome. And he says, Managed WooCommerce at Liquid Web is a WooCommerce platform. So as Gabriel explained, WooCommerce is an e-plugin for WordPress. And so what's a WooCommerce platform? And he says, well, it's kind of like Shopify. I don't know about you, but I don't tend to think of WooCommerce as a competitor to Shopify. Shopify, you make an account and you put in your email address and it takes you through everything. Shopify, same thing. I've used before, but even less than WooCommerce, because with WooCommerce, at least I knew how to be the person who was running a store. With Shopify, I never actually made money using Shopify. So that's how this talk came about. For my own personal learning, I realized that I needed to make a comparison of these two major platforms to be successful in my new role. And I documented it because I figured that other people in the WordPress space would also want to know about it, especially when it comes to talking to your clients about e-commerce sites. I know that even before I was looking at any of this, and I was working on Caldera forms and focusing strictly on forms, the question I would always get was, well, what about Shopify? Well, what about SurveyMonkey? Well, what about Wix? And taking a critical look at why these platforms are so successful and how we can talk about them in an educated way that demonstrates that we know them, we understand them, we know where they're strong, but we know where we can be stronger is how we win business and succeed in the space. By the way, if you go to WordCamp New York, I'm sure you're going to hear all about all of this. Not just this talk, but all of these other sort of strategies about how to succeed as a business owner, a freelancer, and a WordPress professional. So my boss says it's a WooCommerce platform, Christy, and he also said it's a Managed WooCommerce platform. I'm like, what's Managed WooCommerce? I don't even know what Managed WordPress is, right? All I know is that I'm supposed to use it because it's secure. That's what Gabriel told me, that's what everybody else has told me, so I listen. And I have to learn that a Managed WooCommerce platform, or a Managed WordPress platform in general, constitutes of a handful of things. Security, Gabriel mentioned that. If you're running your own BPS and you have your own box, you're responsible for everything that happens to you. Unless you're really great at sysadmin, good luck.
That's true.
Updating your plugins. So we need to keep your plugins up to date. This is really hard. If you hit update all, everything goes white screen and you don't know what to do. Now you need to go into the, well, you can't go into the admin area because it's white. And
Database.
you have to go into the database. You have to return to the previous backup. So Managed WordPress, Managed WooCommerce gives us support in updating plugins. Support's a huge key, 24/7 support. If you have a managed hosting platform, you have managed support, whether it's WP Engine or Flywheel, or not, they're the same. Liquid Web, SiteGround. And in addition to that, when it came to Managed WooCommerce, it meant that the store is one whole thing. It meant that you got coaching on how to grow the store, and it meant that you had all the basic stuff to get started. So Gabriel covered payment processing, abandoned cart recovery, things like that. So in this talk, I'm going to start from the starting point of Managed WooCommerce. That doesn't mean that anything here is something that you can't do unless you're on a Managed WooCommerce platform. If you are a WordPress developer and you are using WooCommerce, then you can do everything that I'm talking about, because all of these products are openly available. And even if you want to tap into the stuff that Liquid Web does to optimize WooCommerce, that's also all on GitHub, and I can email you the links if you'd like. So while I'm going to talk about my comparison from a Liquid Web Managed WooCommerce account perspective, there's nothing in here that you can't implement yourself, because all it is everything that we've already discussed, which is security, updates, support, and the additional products that come with it. I'm just using this because it's free, basically, right? Because I have an employee account. So I wanted to make sure that we're clear on that. So that's generally me. That's what I've been up to and where this came from. And at the end of the day, it came from a desire to learn together. I needed to get to know these platforms in a deep way, and I started out not that much farther from someone who knows what WooCommerce is, maybe has built a site or two, but perhaps hasn't gone much farther than that. And I realized that experiential learning was the best way to succeed at this project, but I needed something to sell. So that something to sell, I decided, was going to be colorful makeup. If you don't know what like the unicorn makeup trend on the internet is, bless you, but it's basically like weird, like colorful makeup that looks wrong. It's called unicorn makeup.
Yeah.
You've seen it all over YouTube. See, it's an internet trend. Unicorn. It's unicorn makeup, and it's all over YouTube, and right. And I needed something to sell to build these two stores for my educational process and getting to know these two platforms to succeed at my role, much in the way that you're here to learn about these two platforms to succeed in your role. And to start off the example, I decided that this was what I was going to go off of. So all of my examples will be about unicorn makeup. Now, the one thing about the decision that I made in terms of what I wanted to build this store out of, that's getting creepy. We have to keep going. Was that I wasn't going to buy pallets and pallets and pallets of pastel makeup, right? I live in a studio apartment. When I lived here in DC, I moved to a slightly larger studio apartment. I don't have room for pallets and pallets of makeup. So this means that I started looking into the dropshipping model. So taken from Wikipedia, dropshipping is a supply chain management method, which means how do we get things from point A to point B, in which the retailer does not keep goods in stock, but instead transfers the customer orders and shipment details to either the manufacturer, another retailer, or a wholesaler, who then ships the goods to the customer. So here's a fun story. At WordCamp Detroit, I went to that event this year. I was talking about this educational project with a handful of people. And it didn't occur to me that most of the people around me wouldn't have been exposed to dropshipping model. So I'm just talking about this like it's common knowledge. And everybody's like, wait, hold on, stop talking about Shopify and WooCommerce. What? I can sell things online without having the inventory in my house? Can I retire on this? The answer is probably not. But it's a good way to get into at least testing out these two different platforms. Now, I do want to acknowledge that there's two different kinds of dropshipping. The first one is sort of this more legitimate dropshipping. You're probably familiar with the company Printful. So this is printed on demand goods. So if I'm somebody who needs my logo on a t-shirt, I can order 100 of those t-shirts off of a sticker mule type, or whatever the other one is called, t-shirt printing website, or I can use a company like Printful to print on demand and drop ship the items. So Printful offers some benefits in terms of giving store owners the ability to offer that to other people, right? So if I want to print one t-shirt for myself, I can. But if I want to make t-shirts that say Caldera Forms and put them on calderaforms.com/shop, I can do that as well. That is a form of dropshipping. And there's this other weirder form of dropshipping, which is what I was doing here, which is people building stores full of products that are actually warehoused somewhere else. And when the order goes through, the supplier, who is not you, fulfills the order. This is a bit of a controversial business model, I think. We're not here to talk about the merits or ethics of this business model. We're here to talk about the comparison between these two platforms. But if you're interested in the dropshipping model, I found this excellent article. This is actually the article that introduced me to the concept period, from The Atlantic, called The Strange Brands in Your Instagram Feed. And it explains what's going on. If you're on Instagram, you may have scrolled past these small brands that sell certain goods. All their pictures look really slick, and they usually send you to a different link on a store. Oftentimes, these are dropshipping stores. And on one end of the argument is marketing is value, and if we're able to tell you about a product that you otherwise wouldn't have known about, then we're adding value. And the other side of that argument is, why am I paying you $79 for something that's $20 and ships from China? I'll leave that up for you to decide. But this article is very interesting. The author tells a story about seeing a code on Instagram, ordering it, and then the slightly disappointing experience that came after. Now, that's not to say that dropshipping is completely illegitimate. There are people who maybe start out in this way, but if they have a good idea, like unicorn makeup, they eventually grow a legitimate following, they create legitimate content, and then they form relationships with perhaps more legitimate suppliers. This is an excerpt from the article. I just thought it was great. What's called dropshipping direct from wherever the item was manufactured or warehoused. That's why my coat showed up in a China Post package. In the comments, somebody describes it as affiliate marketing flipped on its head. In the affiliate marketing model, we have content creators who create valuable content who then pitch you products related to the content that they're creating. In this model, it's similar in the sense that people are creating content, but instead of creating valuable content that tries to sell you something, they're creating a brand and an environment surrounding the store. As you can probably imagine, I fell into a really strange hole trying to figure this out. I eventually pulled myself out of the hole. I don't think any of us are retiring on this. And I wanted to do it from the perspective of comparing the two platforms, but it is an important consideration to pause and understand the unusual and emerging business model that I latched onto for the purposes of this exercise. I want to pause here and make sure that there aren't any questions about dropshipping before we move on to the platform comparison.
I have a dropshipping question. So one of the supply platforms for dropshipping is Alibaba and AliExpress.
Yep.
And there are various integration tools into the various online shopping environments. Is there anything like that for the North American market? Because I think there would be a really great opportunity there to reignite manufacturing, but we have so many people that create things, like Etsy is one of the examples. But if we could put all of those products together and have it integrated just for the North American market, because like I am a manufacturer and I can't get my product on Alibaba because I'm not in China. So is there something like that for the North American market?
You're an excellent example of this sort of larger ethical question that surrounds this dropshipping model, right? Of there is definitely a value of somebody else coming in who doesn't have the manufacturing chops, but who is great at the branding and the e-commerce aspect of it. Can we do it in a way that benefits the manufacturer and benefits the consumer instead of this Alibaba format where we have like strange brands on Instagram? Probably. I'm not familiar with a dropshipping company that works quite like Alibaba for the North American market. I am sure that the person who figured that out would be a bazillionaire. Jack Ma is a bazillionaire. Not that I know of. One of the platforms that I'm going to talk about in this presentation is Oberlo, which is owned by it hooks into Alibaba, exactly.
But have you tried getting on Oberlo?
Well, yes.
It's the same thing. It's
not awesome.
It's very hard.
For
they
WordPress,
don't even have an application process.
For WordPress, the Oberlo alternative that I found and ended up using in this educational project was Shopmaster. And what they are is they are actually a aggregator of suppliers. And they were able to source not only from Alibaba, but from a handful of other suppliers. I can't speak to whether yes or no they supply from Etsy, but the question that you're asking is a valid one. And I think we're just not quite there yet. Yes?
I do
Yeah, I think the thing that people are looking into in North America is the cost of production, because you're looking at a model that will incur cost or profit on the guy who's drop shipping the guy who's shipping the item to the final consumer, and the middle guy who set up the store and sells this. So the cost of production is something that is a problem here. That's why we don't have companies like Alibaba in North America.
And I think that as time goes on, that's going to change, right? Like the Chinese economy is maturing every single day, and that cheap Chinese labor that maybe was true and maybe Alibaba grew on a decade ago is no longer the case.
And the quality. People get this stuff and they're disappointed.
It takes 4 weeks.
Right.
That's why my coach showed up
40 days to
in
get
a China Post package.
Yeah.
Because the cost of production comes into play, and it's latching on to the quality. So if you have someone like Alibaba here in North America, the quality will be something better, but the cost of production will be on the high side.
It doesn't have to.
I mean, it doesn't have to, but I think, it's cost of business, because when you own a store, when you own an e-commerce store,
Because we gotta leave by 9, right?
Yeah,
It'll be like.
I'm keeping an eye on time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
it's like when you own an e-commerce store, you don't just have to take the product, but you also have to focus on the marketing, you have to focus on, who you target, and that takes quite a bit of budget.
Okay, one last scenario. Like within the Shopify platform, I see other people that I know from trading sites whose products I would like to sell on my store. I know they're in the United States, they're manufacturers like me, and we could carry each other's products. If there was a plugin that connects us and that integrates the shipping as part of that, that would be ideal. Just within that, we could, sell stuff that we would sell anyway.
You've got $1 million idea right there.
I know, but who's gonna develop it?
I'm going to take one last question, then we're going to move on to the platform comparison part of it.
Thanks. And I might be kidding, just adding. When you picked unicorn makeup, was there like a discovery process of like what good things you could pick that are easy to drop ship?
Yes, there was. Let's keep moving then.
Okay.
Yep, I have a section for choosing the products. That was interesting. So that's what dropshipping is, and what motivated me to start building these 2 stores. So the first thing that I did was set up some accounts. Now I went on my favorite domain name register and I bought unicornface.club.
Oh,
I chose .club because it was the cheapest. See a pattern here. And I signed up for a Managed WooCommerce dropshipping plan, which is one of the plans that we offer at Liquid Web. So this was pretty fast. It took me about 10 minutes. I just clicked buy and clicked buy. Now for my Shopify store, I did the same thing. I bought pastelize.club, also because it was the cheapest. And Shopify, I signed up and it asked me some questions about myself. Now something that I wanted to acknowledge for that purpose of building empathy for the client that's talking to you, that's comparing Shopify to WooCommerce, is when I signed up for a Managed WooCommerce dropshipping plan, I immediately had to commit to $120. When I signed up for Shopify, I got to talk about myself and pay no money. I'm just playing around. Help me create my logo. Give me a free online webinar. Help me find a product to sell. Is something that I could select on Shopify, and then I receive 10 days of onboarding, helping me with all the things that I selected. Also took me about 10 minutes. The reason I point this out is because when somebody comes to you and you're a WordPress professional and they want to understand the difference, it's very easy for us to talk about the things that are true, such as the customization capabilities of WooCommerce, the extendability of WooCommerce, the fact that it is ultimately cheaper in the long run because of the transaction fees, because of the cost of Shopify plugins. But people who are starting or need a redesign care about the cost right now. And so when I can create value that sends me an email about help me choose products, help me select better ways to grow my store, that adds a lot of value, and Shopify presents that up front. Made some accounts. It didn't take that long though, right? In about 10 minutes I was up, I bought a domain name. Everybody knows a good business starts with a good domain name. And then I needed to make my store look nice. So with Shopify, I had this getting started wizard that I found so clever. It said scroll down and walk me right through it. It said, do you want some free themes? Of course I want free themes because they're free. And I selected something that I thought looked nice. It had a picture of a lady with a brush on her face. And within minutes, 9 minutes to be exact, I had a store that looked okay and was good for my use case. Kind of looked like that. There's a weird placeholder image. When it came to WordPress, Astra Pro comes bundled with Managed WooCommerce. The process looked about the same as selecting any WordPress theme. I went into appearance, I chose what I wanted it to look like. In this case, the default one looked pretty good to me. However, I got slowed down with a WordPress hiccup, which is somewhere along the line, I made a mistake with my administrator password, and I locked myself out of my new Looker website. And so there I was with my own employer's support, being like, can you guys go into the database and change my password for me so that I can get back in? I could have done it myself, but it's managed WordPress, so somebody else can do it. And at the end of the day, it took me a little bit longer than that original thing. And I noted that this isn't the first WordPress site I've made. This is not the first online store I've made. But when our customers and our clients come to us and they're comparing Shopify to what we have to offer, this is the kind of problem that they're running into. And being able to offer them a solution that works at that moment is pretty important. So while having Astra Pro set up, which is a great theme, super fast, highly recommend it, but my password hiccup, it took me about 18 minutes to make the store look not like the default store. So at the end of it, that's kind of what it looked like. I had a home page, it said shop, had a WooCommerce store. If you put Astra on a site and you have WooCommerce with nothing on it, that's what it looks like. It says Howdy Store in the corner. So step 3, this is where I added some products. Now setting up my account and choosing a theme, those are the easy parts. Setting up an account involves buying a domain name. You don't even have to do that at the very beginning. And then setting up an account with either Shopify, which only asks you for an email address and a password, or a hosting service, which you don't necessarily have to commit $120. WooCommerce also recommends Bluehost and SiteGround for starter stores. But then the more difficult parts come with adding products, and that's why your question is valuable. So if you were looking at a traditional business model, then you are looking at the wide, wide world of manufacturing and product listing. Product photography is involved. I believe successful drop shippers are still involved with product photography, as a lot of them order the product and take new pictures of it so that I can't do a reverse image search and find their product for cheaper somewhere else. But for the purposes of comparing the two platforms, I installed Overlow, which we discussed. As we discussed, Overlow requires an application, requires some information from me, requires a waiting period, but it comes highly recommended in the Shopify dashboard. So if I want to create a dropshipping store, Shopify is already ahead of the game, and they say, look, when I logged into it, it was the #1 app. They have this sidebar on the side and it says apps, and the first thing I see is Overlow. Okay. So it said I'm about to install Overlow. It asked me to sign away my future firstborn child, and then I had the application. After that, I had a search bar within the Shopify dashboard that asked me to search for whatever I wanted. So in this case, I just typed the words unicorn makeup. And it actually didn't know what I was talking about. It gave me all these weird like unicorn masks and brushes. And so it actually took a little bit longer. And that is because it sources from Alibaba. You'll see when we talk about the Shotmaster integration that it actually took a lot less time, and I got a lot more specific with what I actually wanted. I actually could not find unicorn makeup. I settled for, or at least I couldn't find makeup I would put on my face. I'm picky, so it took me a little bit. So I settled for these brushes. I think that's an important thing to think about, especially when it comes to dropshipping, is that when we have that single platform, those choices are actually quite limited, and that they're being scoured by hundreds of other people, if not thousands. It took me about 15 minutes. I selected it. I said I want all the regular photos. It imported all of the product information like that for me from Alibaba. And I was done. It's really nice. I totally buy those. Now, on the other hand, I had Shopmaster. Shopmaster is a dropshipping platform, independent of WooCommerce, but it has a WooCommerce dropshipping integration. It works in a very similar way to Overlow, but as we discussed, it sources from a handful more stores. The one that I was the most impressed by seeing was Amazon Prime. Because that means that you can get your products to those end customers with Prime shipping, which is pretty fast. I also saw eBay, I saw Walmart, I did not see Etsy. Now, the thing that I found to be interesting was that it didn't look as nice. It took me a while to figure out, and eventually I ended up looking for the product that I wanted on Amazon. Right, so I went to the Amazon website and I looked for unicorn makeup, but I found exactly what I wanted. I found unicorns unite eyeshadows. And once I imported them using Shopmaster, I had them as a WooCommerce product. That's a regular WooCommerce product. That's not the Shopmaster integration. It worked in the exact same way that the Shopify Overlow plugin did, with a different interface. Took me about 25 minutes.
Excuse me, Christine?
Yes.
Did you say that you ended up with this product in WooCommerce actually without using Shopmaster?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that
You
question?
bypassed Shopmaster completely in this?
No.
No, I used the Amazon.com search itself to look for the product, and then I searched Shopmaster by URL.
You found the URL for the product on Amazon
Correct.
and gave it to Shopmaster?
Yep.
Thank you.
So there I had 2 products added. The experience was slightly different, but it was mostly the same. For step 4, I needed to change some styling. None of these stores are going to go anywhere if they're not beautiful. I have to admit, I did not succeed at making either of these stores beautiful. I'm a product manager, not a designer. I have a great pastel makeup business opportunity for somebody who's a great designer. But for the purposes of the exercise, I wanted to know how true it is, whether it is easier and more approachable to style a WooCommerce site than a Shopify site. I know that when I have built Squarespace sites, I can't change anything on them without them looking terrible. It's like I move one thing and then everything moves over to the side. And so I wanted to see what this experience looked like on these two platforms. Now there is something to be said for I'm familiar with WordPress. So changing around some of the styles was actually quite easy using the WordPress Customizer. I went in, I made things worse. I picked a pale purple and it took me less than 5 minutes. And there it is. Just wrote some bad CSS and moved on. Now here's something that I thought was really interesting. When I tried to do this with Shopify, I really couldn't. I tried really hard to make it ugly. I was like, I want that same pale purple background on pastelize.club, and Shopify was like, no. It's too ugly. That's what the tooltip said. I couldn't. I had an option of changing the background color of the hello bar on top. I changed the text on the hello bar. I had the option of uploading a banner to the scrolling images. But for the most part, I really got kept in my lane. And I felt very determined about this pale purple background. I was like, I really just want this to look bad. And I Googled it, as we do, to figure out how to do a lot of the things that we do. And it was like the only way to do this is to go into your theme's code and add some CSS below this certain part. And I was like, that looks an awful lot like hacking the core, and no. Except they tell you to, but I just moved on. And at the end of the day, what I noticed was that if you gave a client the site, they're probably gonna have a really hard time messing it up. How many of you have handed over a site to a client and watched them mess it up?
Happened 24 hours.
It happened 24 hours ago. But the other thing that I learned was that if I had a very keen eye for design, and I know lots of people for whom this is true, and I was driven completely crazy by a misaligned element on that Shopify theme, I better know how to work with this.
Quick question.
Yes.
Did you include the options that are add-ons, paid add-ons to Shopify, which I know they have numerous, like scroll to top is an extra add-on. Are there any options that would have allowed you to do that if you paid?
I'm not a Shopify expert, so I'm not completely sure, but I do believe that there is a Shopify add-on or app, as they call them, that would allow for a sort of drag and drop page builder experience.
Gotcha.
So, yes.
Shogun.
Shogun, yeah. Thank you. So we could have done that. The reason that I compared this is I was trying to keep it a similar comparison,
Mm-hmm.
and I could add those CSS rules fairly quickly.
Gotcha.
And finally, I went live. It was pretty easy. I pointed in my .club domain names to my respective sites. Both services had easy enough documentation. I waited a minute. And then I had sites. They totally work. Unicornface.club works if you'd like to buy a $20 palette of pastel makeup from Amazon. Pastelize.club does work, but you'll see a page that I haven't paid my bill. But it does work. It's there. And you can take a look at what these sites look like. They're up, and they both took about an hour and a half. However, the experiences were a little bit different, and it really made me ponder the idea of how we sell online stores to others. I think it's very easy for us as WordPress professionals, for me in my product manager role, where I know the capabilities of what WooCommerce can do. And I know what better designers than me can do with it. To say, well, WooCommerce is superior to Shopify because it's more extendable, because you're going to save money on transaction fees. Do you know that Shopify payments is the primary revenue driver of Shopify? I know all of these things, but it's extremely important for me to grow empathy from the perspective that my customer or your client is coming at these things at. They're not thinking about transaction fees. They're thinking about that time period and messing things up, making it look good, being able to add products. And for a lot of people in this room, once you've used WordPress, it's quite easy. But for the brand new WordPress user, it's actually quite difficult. The first time I tried to use a WordPress site was, I think, in 2005, and I wanted to start a music review blog, which went nowhere. And you can tell I'm full of ideas. And I compared it with Blogger, and I was like, this is really hard. Once you understand what a post is, once you understand what a page is, once you understand what a plugin is, it makes sense. But somebody who's not coming at it from an expert perspective looks at the components that I just looked at. And the truth is, WooCommerce is a major part of the WordPress ecosystem for a reason, and that's because e-commerce is huge and we haven't totally cracked it yet. There's a lot of open questions and there's a lot of opportunities. And understanding what's out there, what the competition looks like, and how we can talk about it in a way that makes sense to people of all different skill levels is an important thing to bring to the table. That's me. If you're on Twitter, I am xteacherinos. If you would like my slides or whatever else you need, that is my email. If you would like to see the WooCommerce Resource Center, that is available at lico.com/WooCommerce. And it is a resource center for WooCommerce that talks about how to use it, how to grow sales, how to incorporate email marketing, dropshipping, et cetera, et cetera. And we have 10 minutes for questions with 5 minutes to buffer to get everybody out. Yes?
So I see WooCommerce as like a build your own PC, right? Like you can turn it into a server box, you could build a server farm of the build your own PCs, right? But Shopify is a platform. So it's a MacBook. I'm not going to take a MacBook and build a server farm, right? So, but Shopify, they control their developer marketplace, they control their product marketplace, whereas a product manager at Liquid Web, you control none of that. And so like, how do you compete when Automatic sends like message confusion, telling people that WooCommerce is like Shopify when it's not?
Those are big questions right now.
So I'm just, as a product manager, how are you like trying to attack that?
So we can get into talking about my job. Something that I've discovered as I started this role is that a lot of people are quite curious about what a product manager even actually does.
Yeah, I know what that,
yeah, but to explain that and then answer your question, a product manager is kind of in the business of should, right? Like, what should this be like? What should this experience look like? What should happen when so-and-so clicks that? What should happen when we bundle Astor Pro with Managed WooCommerce dropshipping and somebody goes in and deletes it and throws on some theme from Theme Forest, and then they write to support being like, everything's broken. And we're like, we gave you Astra Pro for free. And they're like, but everything's broken. Right? So my job is to determine what should happen in that scenario and write those rules. And that's a lot of what I do to manage that situation, because you're completely right. When it comes to Liquid Web and the Managed WooCommerce concept, it's a WooCommerce platform that promises to bring all of that vertical integration of a closed WooCommerce ecosystem, but that also lets you change things in that easy way. And I think that's why that ugly purple background is such an interesting note to make, right? Because the way that we control things from getting bad is we prevent you from making them bad. Mm-hmm. But when we prevent you from making things bad, we also prevent you from potentially making things better. So a lot of what we do has to do with figuring out how to respond to those situations. So at Liquid Web, and all other hosting companies basically do this, we have a set of products that come bundled with the Managed WordPress or Managed WooCommerce account. And for example, in the example that I just gave, what would happen is in our support manual, we know that situation, we know to explain it, and we know to give the option, if you switch back to the Astro Pro theme that comes provided, these problems will probably go away. Let us know how we can support you or your developer with that. Right? And that is the challenge of being a hosting company in the WordPress space, or now the niche that Liquid Web is carving, which is the WooCommerce space. So you're completely right. I can't control what Automatic does, right? They pushed out that update about CBD and everything exploded, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then eventually it was a communication aspect over there that then affected some of our customers who maybe are selling CBD tinctures. So this is like the hemp tinctures that don't make you high, but the regulation among them is questionable at best. And so what do we do, right, when this external force changes things?
Yeah.
We respond to them, and we account for the fact that our goal is to create customization while also creating an integrated solution that works quickly and lets you set up a store in 1 hour. I think that there is a lot to consider in terms of when you're within a closed platform, you are also completely subject to their whims. If Shopify decides that Shopify payments tomorrow is not 5%, it's 7%, and you have a giant multi-million-dollar Shopify store,
You're trapped.
Yeah.
Kylie, she stopped.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's how it is.
Yes.
I mean, so I would say one of the biggest advantages to WooCommerce is SEO, which is terrible on Shopify.
Yeah.
And you were talking a little bit earlier, like you managed to sell more on WooCommerce than you did on Shopify. Was that one of the considerations?
WooCommerce is good for SEO because WordPress is good for SEO.
Of course, yeah, because
And-
you can control the URL, whereas Shopify is like your URL / pages / whatever. You cannot have a novelty.
Right. The structure doesn't lend itself to that same sort of super sweet crawlability that WordPress and then therefore WooCommerce has. I think that's a very important talking point. I also think that selling SEO is like, we'll put it online and all these people will come, can be dangerous, but it's true. We didn't really touch on it because I was talking about the experience of setting up the platform, but SEO is also an important way when we're thinking about that empathetic approach to talking about WordPress and Shopify and WooCommerce and Shopify, how they compare, in a way that we can talk to people in the way that they understand. Okay, we're done.